Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Starling. I am the Economic and Cooperative Development Officer at the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation. And welcome to the first episode of Cooperatives 101. And in this episode, what I am going to do is try to give you a brief definition of cooperatives and a bit of the history of cooperatives in general and in Bermuda in particular, and then touch on the cooperative principles and values. Now, as I said, this is just episode 1, and we will be going into more detail on different aspects of cooperatives in future episodes. This is just our way to try to reach out and help people learn more about cooperatives, making use of the different tools that we have, including social media and YouTube. So what is a cooperative? At the very basic level, a cooperative is a business. It is a for-profit enterprise. However, it differs from other business models in that it is jointly owned by its members. It is democratically controlled by its members, and it abides by the cooperative values and principles. The International Cooperative Alliance, which is kind of like a global umbrella group that assists cooperatives, they define a cooperative as an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. Now, it's important to note that cooperatives have existed in all societies all over the world. Wherever humans have existed, some form of cooperative has come into being at some point in time. However, the modern cooperative movement generally traces its history today to the Rochdale Pioneers of 1844. Now, the Rochdale Pioneers consisted of 28 working class people from Rochdale town in England. And in 1844 in England, there was a lot of chronic unemployment, poverty, and social inequality. And in addition to that, they didn't have quite the same food standards that we have today. So a lot of the shopkeepers trying to increase their profit margins by adulterating foodstuffs. So say if you were to buy a loaf of bread, you would still pay the price for a quality loaf of bread, but the bakers would mix bone meal in it to save on flour, for example. So what the Rochdale Pioneers did was they got together to pool their resources to open their own food store, to sell quality food at prices that their working class members could afford. And there had been cooperative movements, of course, before in England, but the difference here was that the Rochdale Pioneers created something called the Rochdale Principles, and those emerged to the cooperative principles that we have today, which I'll get into a little bit later. However, those principles did help the Rochdale Cooperative become successful and flourish more than other cooperatives had up until that point. Now, cooperatives are big business, and you may not know that you actually know several cooperatives. For example, one of the ones that we are more familiar with here in Bermuda would be US-based cooperatives. And a good example of that is Land O'Lakes. We buy their butter and cheese, for example. And they are an example of a producer cooperative where dairy producers got together to create their own business to cut out the middleman rather than selling to a dairy company. Another example of a producer cooperative that we might know here in Bermuda is Sunkist International, the producers of orange juice and the like. Some of you may also be familiar with Mountain Cooperative, Mountain Co-op, which is a hiking gear company cooperative based out of Canada. Now, as I said, cooperatives have existed in all societies over time. And in Bermuda, our cooperative movement actually starts before the Rochdale Pioneers. The first cooperatives in Bermuda were the friendly societies, and they emerged following the emancipation of slavery. And what they were a cooperative that got together to assist the newly emancipated slaves with providing education and financial services and training in trade skills, which at the time they were not able to get from society at large. More recently, we had the Ireland Island Cooperative. They were a cooperative based out of Dockyard, and they were formed amongst the workers who were helping to build the dockyard at the time. They provided food and clothing at reasonable prices for their members. More recently, we have the Bermuda Credit Union, which emerged in the 70s to provide financial banking services for union members, and they are still going strong. And then you have the Cooperative Grocery Store, the BIU Cooperative Grocery Store. That emerged in the 60s, and it lasted for about 30 years, which is actually pretty good for any business. So they were quite successful at their time. Now, more recently, in the 2017 government national election, the PLP was elected on a platform promise to create and support cooperatives. And that led to the founding of the Economic and Cooperative Development Unit at the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, which is how I come to be speaking to you today. Now, phase one of the process was raising awareness and consultation about cooperatives. And we're now moving into phase two, which is continuing to raise awareness and education about cooperatives, but also starting the cooperative pitch, which is like a Shark Tank for cooperatives. People interested in starting a cooperative can answer that and win some startup capital and the like. But also the creation of legislation and continued support, financial and other, for cooperatives in Bermuda. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of the key differences between cooperatives and other business models is that the cooperatives are governed by their cooperative values and principles. And there's a difference between values and principles in that values are qualities or standards that govern the behavior of a person, whereas principles are rules or beliefs that govern our actions. So as a result, principles are based on a person's values, and the values act as foundation for the principles. So what are the cooperative values and principles? There are 6 cooperative values: self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. And the cooperative principles are based on these, and there are 7 of them. They are voluntary and open membership. So cooperatives do not discriminate in their membership. Democratic member control. So cooperatives are democratically controlled and owned by their members. Cooperatives are autonomous and independent. Education, training, and information. And what that means is that the cooperative members are provided with training, on-the-job training, and education within the cooperative, as well as get full information about the cooperative's actions so that they can make informed decisions during their governance of it. Cooperation among cooperatives. And basically, cooperatives look to support other cooperatives, and that can be providing advice to startups, but it can also be cooperatives try to buy and support other cooperatives. And the final principle is concern for community, and that emerges out of the value of solidarity. So what happens with this principle is that cooperatives are concerned about the community that they exist in. So they look to reinvest into their local community and try not to do any harm to their local community either. Now, there are different types of cooperatives, and basically you can classify them into 3 major categories, or 4, depending how you look at it. And these would be worker, consumer, purchasing, and producer cooperatives. And with the consumer cooperative, for example, that's when consumers come together and form a buying club in order to pool their money to buy in bulk the kinds of goods and services they want. So a consumer and a purchasing cooperative are quite similar. A worker cooperative is a cooperative owned by the workers that run the cooperative, that run the business. And a producer cooperative, that is more common in especially agricultural industries. So, for example, we mentioned Land O'Lakes, which is dairy producers. So cow farmers with milk dairy cows. They club together to produce value-added goods in the form of cheese and butter, rather than selling their milk directly to a middleman, which then produces that. And of course, you get hybrid or multi-stakeholder cooperatives, and those can be a combination of all of the above. So you can have a worker cooperative, which is also a consumer cooperative, for example. So that's the general different types of cooperatives. Now, we're going to expand on this in a future episode, but basically cooperatives are governed by their bylaws and constitution, which are inherently democratic, and essentially cooperatives are owned by their members. The way they do that is during the day-to-day, the cooperative hires a executive director that manages their day-to-day business, but they also elect a board once a year through an annual general meeting, and that board provides like a oversight to the executive director. Next, they can meet weekly or monthly to get reports from the executive director and give the executive director direction. But essentially, members have the final say, and they can convene a special general meeting or elect their board and define cooperative policies for the coming year in their general meetings. There's a lot of useful resources about cooperatives. There's the guidance on cooperative principles that you can find at the International Cooperative Alliance. You have the International Labor Organization's 193 Promotion of Cooperatives Convention. In BEDC, you will find our business planning checklist, and also the United States Department of Agriculture has done a lot of work on cooperatives. And a lot of these you can find on the Economic and Cooperative Development Unit's website, which you can see here, bedc.bm/economic-cooperative-development-unit. Or just go to bedc.bm and you'll find it from there. And on that, you'll find a lot of resources in our toolbox for cooperatives and information about our past events. So thank you for joining me today. I've tried to keep this short and just giving you a very basic introduction. And in the future episodes, we will look to talk in more detail about different aspects of cooperatives. So thank you. Have a good day.